In the small towns of America, justice is supposed to be blind. But what happens when the scales are tipped by power, privilege, and a badge? This is the story of a young man who walked free from murder, not because he was innocent, but because his father wore a sheriff's uniform. This is the story of Tyler Brennan. The year was 2012. Millbrook County, nestled in the heart of rural Kentucky, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Population, 11,000. The kind of town where doors stayed unlocked, where neighbors waved from their porches, and where Friday night football games brought the entire community together. It was peaceful. It was safe. Until it wasn't. On the night of October 15th, 20-year-old Sarah Mitchell was found dead in a creek bed just outside of town. Her body, partially submerged in the cold water, had been there for hours. She'd been strangled. Her phone was missing. Her car was abandoned 2 miles away on a dirt road. Keys still in the ignition, driver's door left wide open. Sarah was a local girl. She'd graduated from Millbrook High 3 years earlier, where she'd been homecoming queen and captain of the debate team. Everyone loved Sarah. She worked at her father's hardware store downtown and took night classes at the community college, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. She had her whole life ahead of her. The investigation began immediately. Sheriff Marcus Brennan held a press conference the next morning, standing on the courthouse steps with his jaw set and his eyes hard. "We will find whoever did this," he promised the crowd of reporters and concerned citizens. Sarah Mitchell was one of our own. Justice will be served. But what Sheriff Brennan didn't tell anyone was that his son, Tyler, had been the last person to see Sarah alive. Tyler Brennan was 22 years old, a college dropout who'd moved back home after flunking out of State University. He had a reputation around town, though people rarely spoke about it openly. Too many speeding tickets that disappeared. A drunk driving incident that never made it to court. A few complaints from ex-girlfriends that were quietly settled. Nothing ever stuck to Tyler Brennan. After all, his father was the sheriff. On the night Sarah died, witnesses saw her leaving Murphy's bar with Tyler around 10:30 p.m. They'd been drinking together, laughing, apparently having a good time. Murphy's had security cameras, but the footage from that night mysteriously corrupted. The hard drive failed, the owner explained. These things happen with old equipment. Sarah's best friend, Jennifer Walsh, told investigators that Sarah had been nervous about meeting Tyler that night. She said he'd been texting her constantly for weeks. Jennifer recalled, her voice breaking. She finally agreed to one drink just to get him to stop. She told me if she wasn't home by midnight to call her. Midnight came and went. Jennifer called. No answer. She called again at 12:30. Nothing. At 1 a.m., she called Sarah's parents. By 2 a.m., they'd reported her missing. The investigation moved quickly at first. Deputies canvassed the bar, interviewed patrons, collected evidence. But then something strange happened. The investigation began to slow down. Witnesses who'd seen Sarah and Tyler together were interviewed once and never called back. The bartender who'd served them that night suddenly remembered very little. Evidence collected from Sarah's car sat in the lab, untested, for weeks. Deputy Linda Martinez was one of the first responders at the scene. She'd been with the department for 8 years, known for her thoroughness and dedication. Years later, she would tell reporters what really happened behind closed doors. "I knew something was wrong from the beginning," she said. "When Tyler's name came up as a person of interest, Sheriff Brennan pulled me into his office. He told me we needed to be careful, that we couldn't ruin a young man's life over speculation. But it wasn't speculation. We had evidence. That evidence included scratches on Tyler's neck and arms when he was brought in for questioning 3 days after Sarah's death. Tyler claimed he'd gotten them from his dog. He owned a Labrador Retriever, a breed not particularly known for aggressive scratching. Nobody pressed the issue. There were also mud stains on Tyler's boots that matched the soil composition from the creek bed where Sarah was found. A forensic analyst noted this in her report, but the report was never forwarded to the district attorney's office. It sat in a filing cabinet in the sheriff's department, collecting dust. And then there was Tyler's alibi. He claimed he dropped Sarah off at her car around 11 p.m. and driven straight home. His mother, Elizabeth Brennan, confirmed this, stating that Tyler had arrived home at 11:15 and had been there the rest of the night. But cell phone records told a different story. Tyler's phone had pinged off a tower near the creek bed at 11:45 p.m., staying in that location for approximately 30 minutes before returning to the Brennan residence. When confronted with this information, Sheriff Brennan had an explanation ready. Cell towers can be unreliable in rural areas, he told his deputies. That tower serves a 20-mile radius. It doesn't prove anything, but it did prove something. Combined with everything else, it painted a picture that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Sarah's father, Robert Mitchell, was a quiet man who'd lived in Millbrook his entire life. He trusted the sheriff. He'd voted for Marcus Brennan in every election since the man first ran for office in 1998. But as the weeks turned into months with no arrest, no charges, no justice for his daughter, Robert Mitchell's trust began to crumble. "I started asking questions," Robert would later tell reporters. "Why wasn't Tyler arrested? Why wasn't he even named as a suspect? Every time I went to the sheriff's office, Marcus would put his hand on my shoulder and tell me they were doing everything they could. But they weren't. They were protecting his son." The breaking point came when Robert hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent named David Chun, who specialized in cold cases. Chun spent 3 months reviewing the evidence, interviewing witnesses, and building a timeline of that night. What he found was damning. Chun discovered that Tyler had a history of aggressive behavior toward women that had been systematically covered up by his father. 3 different women had filed complaints against Tyler over the past 4 years, alleging harassment, stalking, and in one case, physical assault. None of these complaints had resulted in charges. All 3 women had been convinced to drop their complaints after visits from Sheriff Brennan himself, who assured them that his son would stay away from them. One of these women, Ashley Thornton, agreed to speak with Chun on the condition of anonymity. "Tyler wouldn't take no for an answer," she explained. "When I broke up with him, he started showing up at my work at my apartment, calling me 50 times a day. When I finally filed a complaint, his father came to my house. He didn't threaten me, not exactly. But he made it clear that things would be easier for everyone if I just dropped it. He said Tyler was going through a rough time and that pressing charges would ruin his future. So I dropped it. I regret that every single day, especially after what happened to Sarah." Chun also discovered that the corrupted security footage from Murphy's bar hadn't been corrupted at all. The hard drive had been removed from the system and replaced with a blank one. The original drive was never logged into evidence. The bar owner, Tom Murphy, had been friends with Sheriff Brennan for 30 years. When Chun interviewed him, Murphy broke down. "Marcus asked me to get rid of the footage," Murphy admitted. "He said it would only complicate things, that Tyler wasn't involved. I trusted him. I believed him. I helped cover up a murder." Armed with Chun's findings, Robert Mitchell went to the state police. He bypassed the local authorities entirely and demanded a full investigation into the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department and the handling of his daughter's case. The state police opened an investigation in March of 2013, 5 months after Sarah's death. They quickly confirmed what Chun had found and more. The corruption ran deep. Evidence had been tampered with. Witnesses had been intimidated, and Sheriff Brennan had used his position to systematically obstruct justice for his son. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Despite overwhelming evidence of corruption and obstruction of justice, the case against Tyler Brennan for murder remained weak. The physical evidence that could have tied him directly to Sarah's death had been compromised. The chain of custody had been broken. Defense attorneys argued that anything collected during the initial investigation was tainted fruit from a poisoned tree. In June of 2013, Tyler Brennan was finally arrested, not for murder, but for obstruction of justice and providing false statements to investigators. Sheriff Marcus Brennan was arrested on charges of official misconduct, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. Elizabeth Brennan was charged with providing a false alibi. The murder charge that everyone expected, that Sarah's family desperately sought, was never filed. The district attorney explained that while they believed Tyler was responsible for Sarah's death, the corrupted investigation had made a murder conviction virtually impossible. No jury would convict based on compromised evidence, no matter how compelling the circumstantial case might be. Tyler Brennan pleaded guilty to obstruction and false statements. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison. He served 11 months and was released on good behavior in May of 2014. He was 24 years old. Sarah Mitchell was still dead. Sheriff Marcus Brennan pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and served 2.5 years. His law enforcement career was over, his reputation destroyed. But his son was free. Elizabeth Brennan received probation and community service. The Brennan family left Millbrook shortly after Marcus was released from prison. They moved to another state, started over with new names, new identities. Tyler Brennan is out there somewhere today, living his life while Sarah Mitchell's remains in Millbrook Cemetery under a headstone that reads, "Taken too soon, forever in our hearts." The aftermath of the case sent shockwaves through Millbrook County. The entire sheriff's department was placed under state oversight for 3 years. 5 deputies resigned or were fired for their roles in the cover-up. Deputy Linda Martinez, who tried to do the right thing, was promoted to interim sheriff and later elected to the position in her own right. She still holds that position today and has made transparency and accountability the cornerstones of her administration. But for Robert Mitchell and his wife Susan, no amount of administrative reform can bring their daughter back. The system failed Sarah, Robert said in an interview 5 years after her death. It failed her because we put our trust in people who put their own interests above justice. Marcus Brennan wasn't just Sarah's murderer by proxy. He was a betrayer of everything that badge was supposed to represent. The case raised troubling questions about accountability in law enforcement. How many other cases like this exist in small towns across America? How many crimes have been covered up by those sworn to solve them? How many families have been denied justice because the perpetrator had the right last name or the right connections? Legal experts point to the Brennan case as a textbook example of why independent oversight of law enforcement is essential. When police investigate themselves, when local prosecutors work daily with the departments they're supposed to hold accountable, conflicts of interest are inevitable, explained criminal justice professor Dr. Amanda Richardson. The Brennan case shows us what happens when those conflicts are allowed to override the pursuit of justice. The case also highlighted the vulnerability of victims in small communities where power structures are entrenched and insular. Sarah Mitchell trusted that if something happened to her, the system would respond. She trusted that justice was blind. She was wrong. Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's best friend, became a victims' rights advocate after the case concluded. She works with families who've lost loved ones to violence and helps them navigate the criminal justice system. Sarah's case changed me, Jennifer said. It showed me that justice isn't automatic. It has to be fought for. And sometimes, even when you fight with everything you have, you still don't get it. The psychological impact on the community was profound. Trust in law enforcement, once unquestioning in Millbrook, had been shattered. Even under Sheriff Martinez's reformed leadership, some residents remained skeptical. Town hall meetings that were once sparsely attended were now packed with citizens demanding transparency and accountability. Body cameras were mandated for all deputies. An independent civilian review board was established to investigate complaints against law enforcement. But these reforms came too late for Sarah Mitchell. There's a cruel irony in the fact that Tyler Brennan's freedom came at the cost of his father's corruption being exposed. Had Marcus Brennan simply allowed the investigation to proceed naturally, had he trusted in his son's innocence if he truly believed in it, the outcome might have been different. Instead, his interference guaranteed that the truth would be buried but never forgotten, suspected but never proven beyond reasonable doubt. Forensic psychologist Dr. Marcus Webb has studied cases of familial protection in criminal investigations. Parents protecting their children is a primal instinct, Dr. Webb explained. But when a parent in a position of authority abuses that authority to shield their child from accountability, they're not protecting their child at all. They're enabling them, teaching them that actions don't have consequences, that power can override justice. Marcus Brennan didn't save his son. He condemned him to a life lived in the shadow of Sarah Mitchell's death, always suspected, always whispered about, never fully free even if the law says he is. Tyler Brennan has never publicly addressed Sarah Mitchell's death. He's never expressed remorse, never offered an explanation, never acknowledged her family's loss. In the eyes of the law, he's innocent of murder. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was decided long ago. Sarah's mother, Susan Mitchell, planted a garden in her daughter's memory. Every year on Sarah's birthday, the garden blooms with sunflowers, Sarah's favorite flower. Neighbors and friends leave flowers at the garden throughout the year, a constant reminder of the young woman who was taken too soon and the justice that never came. People ask me if I've found peace, Susan said in a recent interview. I haven't. I don't think I ever will. But I found purpose. I speak at schools, at community events, anywhere people will listen. I tell Sarah's story. I make sure she's not forgotten. And I warn young women to be careful, to trust their instincts, to know that even in small towns where everyone knows everyone, danger can wear a familiar face. The Brennan case has been studied in criminal justice programs across the country as an example of institutional failure. It's been featured in documentaries, true crime podcasts, and investigative journalism pieces. Each retelling brings new attention to the systemic problems that allowed a suspected murderer to walk free. But beyond the legal analysis, beyond the academic discussions, beyond the media coverage, there's a human story of profound loss. Sarah Mitchell had dreams. She wanted to help animals, to build a life, to fall in love, to maybe have children of her own someday. All of that was taken from her on a cold October night by someone she trusted enough to have a drink with. And the man who likely took her life, who allegedly wrapped his hands around her throat and squeezed until she stopped struggling, until her body went limp, until her dreams died with her in that creek bed, got away with it. Not because the evidence didn't exist, but because his father made sure that evidence would never see a courtroom. There's a broader lesson here about the corrosive nature of privilege and power. Tyler Brennan grew up knowing that the rules didn't apply to him the same way they applied to everyone else. Speeding tickets disappeared. Drunk driving charges evaporated. Complaints from frightened women were swept under the rug. He learned that his father's badge was a shield that could protect him from any consequence. And when that shield finally failed, when the scrutiny became too intense to deflect, it was too late. The damage had been done, and Sarah Mitchell was dead. Marcus Brennan betrayed his oath as a law enforcement officer. He betrayed the community that had trusted him with their safety. He betrayed every family who'd ever turned to him for help, believing he would do the right thing. But most of all, he betrayed Sarah Mitchell. He looked at her body in that creek bed and decided that protecting his son mattered more than giving her justice. He chose family over duty, corruption over integrity, silence over truth. The question that haunts many who followed this case is whether Tyler would have killed again if he'd been arrested immediately. Would other young women have been spared if Marcus Brennan had done his job instead of obstructing it? We'll never know. Tyler left Kentucky, disappeared into anonymity in another state. For all we know, he could be working in an office, shopping at a grocery store, living next door to any of us. The system let him walk away, and he did. In Millbrook today, Sarah Mitchell's name is everywhere. A scholarship was established in her memory at the community college, awarded annually to a student pursuing veterinary studies. The local animal shelter was renamed the Sarah Mitchell Animal Rescue Center. Every year on the anniversary of her death, the community holds a candlelight vigil at the courthouse steps where her father once demanded justice and got only broken promises. Sheriff Linda Martinez attends every vigil. She stands with the Mitchell family, often with tears in her eyes, carrying the weight of institutional failure, even though she tried to stop it. We owe it to Sarah to do better, Martinez said at last year's vigil. We owe it to every victim who comes after her to ensure that justice isn't selective, that it isn't for sale, that it can't be obstructed by a badge. We failed her. I failed her. That failure drives everything I do in this job. The Brennan case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our justice system. It reminds us that institutions are only as honest as the people who run them. It shows us that without accountability, without transparency, without checks on power, even the guardians of justice can become its greatest threat. Sarah Mitchell deserved better. She deserved an investigation untainted by corruption. She deserved a trial where evidence was presented and weighed. She deserved a system that valued her life as much as it protected the powerful. She deserved justice. She got none of it. And somewhere out there, Tyler Brennan lives with what he knows. Whether he lies awake at night, seeing Sarah's face, whether guilt gnaws at him in quiet moments, whether he's convinced himself of his own innocence, we can't say. But he knows. Whatever happened in those final moments of Sarah Mitchell's life, Tyler Brennan knows the truth. And he's chosen to keep that truth to himself, hidden behind the wall of protection his father built with corruption and lies. This is the reality of justice in America. Sometimes the guilty go free. Sometimes power corrupts absolutely. Sometimes a sheriff's son gets away with murder. And sometimes the only justice available is the justice of memory, of refusing to forget, of telling the story until everyone knows the truth, even if the law never acknowledges it. Sarah Mitchell was 20 years old when she died. She'd been alive for 7,300 days. She'd laughed, loved, dreamed, and planned for a future she'd never see. In the end, all of that was worth less than protecting a sheriff's reputation and his son's freedom. That's not justice. That's not even close. As we close this chapter of Twisted Tales, we're left with more questions than answers. How do we fix a system that can be so easily corrupted? How do we ensure that power doesn't override justice? How do we protect the vulnerable when those sworn to protect them become a threat? These questions linger long after Sarah's story ends, demanding answers we haven't yet found. But we could do one thing. We can remember. We can say her name, Sarah Mitchell. We can honor her memory by demanding better, by holding the powerful accountable, by refusing to accept a justice system that works differently for the privileged than it does for everyone else. Because Sarah Mitchell deserved justice, and so does every victim who comes after her. The system failed Sarah. We must ensure it doesn't fail the next young woman whose life is cut short by violence and whose justice is stolen by corruption. This has been Twisted Tales TV. Remember Sarah Mitchell. Remember what happened when justice was for sale. And demand better. Always demand better.